They won't stay dead. Night of the Living Dead. Well, you guessed it. At the Movies with Film is finally showing Night of the Living Dead. You've been waiting for it. Judith O'Dea, Russell Streiner, also Dwayne Jones, not listed on the cover of this, but Dwayne Jones, really the key lead in Night of the Living Dead. Welcome, everybody, down here in the vaults of Kirkwood, showing the classic 1968 George Romero film. The Pittsburgh-based independent filmmaker at that time got together with a bunch of different people to create this film that's actually become quite famous. 1968 is sort of a watershed year for the fantastic. That was the year that Rosemary's Baby came out. That's the year that 2001: A Space Odyssey came out. That is the year also Planet of the Apes came out. It's a favorite of mine. Night of the Living Dead. We've seen a few zombie films here. This is a film that resurrects the zombie for new uses in a way. Yes, he's the lumbering about zombie, but instead of the zombie who's out to, well, do some labor for you, sort of a trained amnesiac monkey, in this case, they throw in something different. The zombie is a cannibal. The zombie craves human flesh. And that's what gives this film its visceral power. The scene with the zombies out in the dark outside of the house where the folks, the survivors, are housed, nailed inside. And outside, the zombies hammering on the doors, eating human flesh. Eating. One of my favorite scenes is from Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead, when the commandos break into the tenement, go downstairs and open up where the dead have been kept, and you see all these zombies eating legs and arms. That's a power that the film up to this point had had largely, except for maybe Herschel Gordon Lewis, okay, and his Blood Feast and things like that, had opened the door for. Okay, 2000 Maniacs, etc. Gore Gore Girls, Wizard of Gore, Herschel Gordon Lewis, probably the man who opened up the floodgates for this kind of gore. But Night of the Living Dead uses it quite effectively. Not in color, black and white, shot by George Romero himself. And even though the others are in color, those work. This film was followed by Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, the trilogy of George Romero. Black and white does a great service for this film. The high contrast of the light patches falling off with the dark passages. The fall off, quite abrupt between light and dark. What are you seeing? What you were actually seeing? Can you believe it? I remember seeing this at the drive-in. A lot of people. I was in junior high at the time that this film came out, and I remember talking to a lot of people. Have you seen Night of the Living Dead yet? And people talking about that horrendous sequence where they're gnawing on bones and things like that. Quite an influence on people. This film is important in the horror genre. 1968, opening up a whole area of new exploration of the horror genre. The horror of the other, who maybe is us. One of the things that Romero captures so well in this film and the other zombie films is the idea that the zombie is not necessarily a totally other entity. It is otherness. But the horror of this is that zombie is us. That zombie is you. That zombie is me. That zombie is what we might become. Whatever metaphors you want to put upon that. Sense of alienation of 20th century man from a Marcuse perspective. Or the idea of the consumer, like Dawn of the Dead captures well, set in a shopping mall, zombies walking around, in the shopping mall, returning to places that they remember. Whatever metaphor you want to put upon the zombie. The key to remember in Romero's films is that zombie is us. It is our own families, in a horrible way, deformed, pressurized, and returned from the repressed. We held them down, and they have come back for blood, come back for flesh. And whose flesh do they come back for? Just like in our own families. Who do they come back for? They come back for us. And we can house ourselves in. We can board ourselves inside of our homes. But the problem is, and one of the things that you'll see in all of the Romero Dead films is that the zombies, yeah, they're a problem. They're a horrible thing that we have to deal with, and it escalates, it becomes much worse as the three films progress, the level of zombiness. But another horror that we have to deal with is the pressures that zombification externally puts upon us as a survivor group. The people inside of the house fight against each other, don't know how to unite. They're tearing at each other. The pressure has sort of put the family to the screws and made those rupturing points of the family rise up. The horror in this film, again, is not just zombies. It's the family itself. It's the, can we cooperate? Can we get along in the face of this? One of the early progenitors of this film, The Birds, Alfred Hitchcock. Same sense of family drawn inside, besieged, boarded inside of a house, being attacked by unnatural forces. One of the things I like about the zombie films in Romero's sense, even though this film tries to give us sort of a silly explanation of where this thing comes from, where the zombies come from, is that we really don't know, as these things progress, what makes a zombie. What has created this? Is it some extraterrestrial thing? Is it just some kind of curse? Is it like one of the characters says, when there's no more room left in hell, the dead will walk the earth? What is it that created this? And really, when it gets down to it, the point of what has created them is not as important as how do we face it? How do we deal with it? How do we accommodate it, reject it, incorporate it, co-opt it, whatever way that the manners in which that we meet the horror, the other. If we recognize it as ourselves, perhaps, maybe that is the beginning. Saying that is a negative or a horrible reflection of ourselves. Well, the next step is, what do you do then? Well, the best way to watch this film, I think, is in the dark, alone, even though you might have people sitting next to you. In the dark, you're always alone. And who knows what that person in the dark next to you is actually doing right now.